Many of our beliefs about the most effective study methods are completely misguided. Whatever you think about the best ways to learn is likely inaccurate. The most effective study techniques aren't always obvious. Thankfully, today you will discover the optimal methods for studying. It's interesting to reflect on a more recent study that explored effective study strategies. This study examined whether studying a subject 4 times, essentially study, 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 was superior in terms of retaining that information in people's memories and enabling them to use that information in a flexible manner, which is a key component of creativity, ultimately achieving mastery over the material. In this study, one group studied the material once, while another engaged in 2 rounds, and a third group studied 3 times before being tested. There was also a separate group that studied the material once and then took 1, 2, or 3 tests on the same content. Therefore, what I have just described are 3 distinct groups that all read a passage related to animals and biology, among other topics, in various experiments. To summarize, one group engaged in 4 study sessions before taking a test. The second group studied 1, 2, and 3 times and then took a test, while the third group studied once and subsequently took 3 tests before finally being assessed. The performance of these groups was analyzed based on the outcomes of their final test. You might consider the scenarios as S, study 4 times, then test, SSST, study 3 times, test, then later test, or STTTT, study, test, and then later test. The comparison focuses on their test performance after some time has passed. A critical takeaway here is twofold. Firstly, it's likely that you can predict which group performed the best on that follow-up test. Essentially, the results of that final assessment were closely aligned with the quantity of testing each group underwent on the material. The more tests you take to interact with the subject matter, the better you'll perform on it in the future. Of course, at some point, you need to first engage with the material. That's the essence of studying and learning. However, once you've been exposed to new information, taking additional tests, even if you don't perform ideally on those tests, still leads to improved performance later on, especially if you have the opportunity to see the correct answers and compare them with your own. In other words, the frequency of exposure to the material is not as critical as how you focus on the content and then self-assess your understanding of it. If you have an instructor giving you a test, it's crucial to undergo testing on the material multiple times, ideally 2 or 3 times. That approach truly helps solidify the knowledge in your neural pathways, resulting in profound and lasting changes to your brain circuits that encompass that information, what we refer to as neural encoding. The frequency of testing greatly enhances your retention of the material. Some might immediately worry, what if I study, take a test, and somehow reinforce incorrect information? Fortunately, this doesn't seem to be an issue. As long as you are aware of the correct answers following your tests, even if your accuracy is around 40% or 50%, this strategy is still far more effective than merely rereading the material. This might come as a surprise, but an even more astonishing insight, which many should grasp early on, is the following. When students are asked how confident they are in their grasp of the material they've just learned and how well they predict they will perform on an exam, a clear pattern emerges from these studies. I chuckle at this because it's almost unbelievable. The students who studied the material 4 times often believe they will excel on the final exam.